Hi, I'm your host, Abby from Rtings.com. Today we're reviewing our third Sony BRAVIA of the season, and this time it's an OLED. Oh yeah, you heard that right. The Sony BRAVIA 8 is an OLED sandwiched between two QLED models, namely the BRAVIA 7 and the BRAVIA 9. It's also the only OLED that Sony's releasing in 2024, as they're carrying over the 2023 Sony A80L as their high-end OLED offering. So let's find out if this bad boy is worth it. We bought and tested the 65-inch Sony BRAVIA 8, and the results are also valid for the 55 and 77-inch models. The Sony BRAVIA 8 has a premium design that looks fantastic in any room. Its thin metallic bezels give the TV a sleek look when viewed from the front. It also looks good from the back with that checkerboard pattern, although it's made of plastic and isn't completely flat. It's a bit thicker near the bottom and has a noticeable slope towards the top, where it's thinner. Still, the TV is not very thick, so it'll look good if you have it mounted on the wall using the TV's VESA mounting points. Just keep in mind that the wall mount will have to be purchased separately. The metal feet are very similar to this year's other BRAVIA models. They're sturdy, and they hold the TV very well, so it barely wobbles when pushed. Plus, the feet can be placed in 4 distinct positions. Horizontally, they can be placed in a narrow or wide position, and vertically they can be set high, lifting the TV about 3.9 inches from the table, or low, which gives you about 1.7 inches of clearance. These adjustments help make this a very versatile unit when it comes to placement, as it'll fit on most surfaces with ease, and it has enough clearance for any soundbar. For cable management, there are plastic covers to hide the cables coming out, but unfortunately there are no clips of any kind to funnel cables through. The ports are in a recessed cutout on the far left if viewed from the front, making them hard to reach if the TV is flush against the wall. There are 4 HDMI ports, though only ports 3 and 4 support HDMI 2.1 bandwidth for 4K at 120Hz signals. Port 3 is the eARC port, which means you'll lose one of your 2.1 inputs if you connect the TV to a receiver or soundbar. Similar releases from Samsung and LG this year all have 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, so it is a bit of a bummer if you have multiple HDMI 2.1 devices. You'll have to find a way to bypass the TV's limited amount of ports, likely through an HDMI 2.1 hub. At least it can pass through all major audio formats from Dolby and DTS. Plus, it supports the popular Dolby Vision HDR format. Additional inputs include 2 USB ports, one of which is a USB 3.0 port, 1 digital optical audio out port, 1 infrared in port, and an ATSC 3.0 tuner for 4K over-the-air channels. It also has Sony's S-Center input, so you can connect certain Sony-branded soundbars and receivers to the TV and use the TV's built-in speakers as a sender channel. The Sony BRAVIA 8 uses version 12 of Google TV, and the interface is smooth and easy to use. The TV has a minor bug when using the Detailed Signal Info option. It shows a native refresh rate of 120Hz when it's outputting a 60Hz signal. You can also cast content from your phone using the built-in AirPlay 2 or Chromecast, or play videos directly from a USB stick. Like on other BRAVIA models this year, the remote is backlit and has a matte finish with blue speckles. It has buttons for popular streaming services, and you can use the built-in microphone to input voice commands. You can't ask it to cook your dinner just yet, but who knows, maybe next year. Let's talk about contrast. As this is an OLED, you already know what's coming, right? This TV's contrast is remarkable. Due to OLED self-lit pixels, the TV displays bright highlights next to perfect inky blacks. Put this thing in a dark room and watch the magic unfold. There's no blooming whatsoever, and there are no annoying lighting zone transitions since there are no zones to speak of. With OLEDs, there is typically a drawback. And usually, at least when compared to LED TVs, that drawback is their peak brightness. It's less of an issue at the high end of the OLED market, but in the mid-range, which is where the BRAVIA 8 sits, OLEDs are still noticeably dimmer than LED TVs are. Still, it's good overall, and in a dark room, bright highlights and HDR really pop when they're next to the TV's perfect blacks. Unfortunately, large bright scenes are significantly dimmer than scenes with smaller highlights due to its aggressive automatic brightness limiter. The Sony BRAVIA 8 has excellent PQ EOTF tracking, so content is mostly displayed as the content creator intended. However, a large portion of shadows and midtones are still a bit dimmer than intended, and some midtones and highlights are a bit brighter than intended. But hey, at least there's a gradual roll-off near the TV's peak brightness to maintain details and highlights that are brighter than what the TV is capable of. The TV also has an excellent color gamut. It covers nearly the entire range of colors in the DCI-P3 color space, and colors are extremely accurate. Honestly, it's almost perfect in the DCI-P3 space. In the Rec 2020 space, which is used in nature documentaries and animated films, the TV's coverage isn't nearly as competent as it is in the DCI-P3 space. Still good overall, but all colors are undersaturated and inaccurate, especially with greens and cyans. The TV has very good color volume. It displays dark saturated colors very well, and its ability to display bright whites is outstanding. It doesn't display other colors nearly as brightly as it does whites, but it's still enough to display bright and vibrant colors. Ultimately, it's just a colorful TV. Now, what if you prefer to watch SDR shows? Well, you're in luck because this TV's SDR brightness is very good, and it overcomes glare in bright rooms quite well. It's certainly much better than last year's Sony A80L, so that's a nice upgrade. Its automatic brightness limiter is aggressive, however, and this is most noticeable when bright highlights take up most of the screen or if the entire image is bright. Think about watching hockey with its entirely white rink. But outside of that, there isn't much variation in the TV's SDR peak brightness. So, the TV is bright, but it's not the brightest TV around. Is that a problem? Not really, because it has outstanding reflection handling. Its glossy screen finish significantly reduces the intensity of indirect reflections, like when you have glare from a ceiling light that isn't directly facing the screen. It also does a fantastic job of reducing the intensity of direct reflections, like a lamp positioned in front of the screen, or if you have the TV positioned directly across a bunch of bright windows. The Sony BRAVIA 8 has just decent pre-calibration accuracy. For most people, it looks perfectly fine, but if you're a color purist, you're likely to be annoyed at how this TV looks out of the box. Its white balance is disappointing, as its blues are very overrepresented in mid-grays and brighter grays. The color temperature is noticeably cooler than our target of 6500 Kelvin, giving everything a bluish tint. At least the color accuracy is great, but there are still some inaccuracies with most colors. Gamut is close to our target of 2.2, but some scenes are slightly too dark, while others are slightly too bright. Thankfully, the TV is very easy to calibrate, so your calibrator will be able to bring this TV's accuracy to near perfection in no time at all. The TV has an incredibly wide viewing angle that remains mostly consistent from almost any angle, but there is some color washout at more aggressive angles. Plus, the TV has a very slight green tint from about 30 degrees onward. Not the end of the world, but it's there. It's still a fantastic TV for a wide seating arrangement overall. Some of Sony's competitors are slowly catching up when it comes to image processing, but Sony is still the market leader, and the BRAVIA 8 is no slouch when it comes to processing. For example, its low-quality content smoothing does an excellent job at smoothing out artifacts and low bitrate content while still preserving details. What if you have a massive collection of movies on DVD and you're hesitant to upgrade them to Ultra HD Blu-rays? Well then, fear not. This TV does an excellent job when upscaling low-resolution content like DVDs, standard definition cable channels, or lower-resolution streams. Just remember that no matter how good a TV's upscaling is, lower-resolution content will always look low-resolution. It's just that some TVs, like the BRAVIA 8, clean up that content better than others. Are you a big fan of content with lots of color gradients in it? Get this TV, as it has very good HDR native gradient handling. There's some noticeable banding in dark grays and bright greens, but all other colors have minimal banding or no banding at all. All jokes aside though, this TV has very solid image processing. This TV removes judder automatically from 24p sources like a Blu-ray player or an external streaming device with a match frame rate feature. For 60Hz sources like a cable box or the native apps, the motion flow setting has to be enabled with both sliders set to min and Cinemotion set to high. If you're looking for a TV to pair with the newly released Elden Ring DLC, keep on watching as we're jumping knee-deep into gaming. The Sony BRAVIA 8 has a nearly instantaneous response time, resulting in incredibly clear motion with almost no blur behind fast-moving objects. This is why OLEDs are just so good for gaming. You want your games to be responsive, and OLEDs just deliver on that front. Still, keep in mind that due to the sample and hold nature of OLED tech, there's still some persistence blur when gaming at 60Hz, but it's not noticeable at higher refresh rates. Typically, Sony TVs lag behind their competition when it comes to input lag, but they're always good enough for almost any gamer. Just that very competitive gamers would for sure notice that Sony TVs tend to have worse input lag than models from, well, almost anyone else. That said, the BRAVIA 8 has some of the best input lag numbers we've seen on a Sony TV. The three Sony TVs that we've tested to have better input lag than the BRAVIA 8 are the Sony X80K, X75K, and X77L. Of course, these TVs are lower-tier LED models and are not even close to being in the same league as the Bravia 8 in terms of image quality or response time. So if you're specifically looking for a Sony TV for your gaming needs, this could be it. The Bravia 8 supports almost everything from the current-gen consoles, except for 1440p. That doesn't really matter, however, as you have no real reason to ever set any 4K at 120Hz TV to 1440p on consoles. It has auto low latency mode, so it automatically switches to game mode when it detects a console. And if you're a PS5 gamer, you're in luck, as the TV has unique features for the PS5, such as auto HDR tone mapping and auto genre picture mode. On the Xbox, the TV supports Dolby Vision gaming at 4K and 120Hz. Ultimately, this is an excellent TV for gaming. So, should you buy this TV? Probably not. I know we've just praised this TV's gaming performance, and now we're saying you probably shouldn't buy it. And sure, it's probably the best gaming TV that Sony has made in a while, but it still lags behind its competition in that regard. Its input lag is still a bit higher than TVs from other brands, and it only has 2 HDMI 2.1 ports with up to 4K at 120Hz support. Most of Sony's competitors now have 4 HDMI 2.1 ports with up to 4K at 144Hz support. And when it comes to image quality, it's amazing. But other products are just as amazing for a lower price, like the LG C4, for example. The LG C4 and the Bravia 8 are extremely similar TVs, but the LG is a bit brighter than the Sony and more accurate out of the box. And its image processing is just as good as the Bravia 8. It's also better for gamers due to having slightly lower input lag than the Sony and 4K at 144Hz HDMI ports. It's hard to make a case for the Bravia 8 here. There's also the Samsung S90D, which is a lot brighter than the Sony, so highlights pop way more than the former. The Samsung is also significantly more colorful, with a lot less banding in its HDR color gradients. When it comes to image accuracy, the S90D is more accurate than the Bravia 8 in SDR, with a much wider viewing angle, and is again superior for gamers. The Sony TV does have some advantages over the S90D. Firstly, it supports the more popular Dolby Vision HDR format, while Samsung is limited to the equivalent but less popular HDR10+. The Bravia 8 also passes through DTS audio formats, and outside of HDR gradients, it has slightly better image processing. This could make the Sony the better choice for movie purists, but frankly, purists would be leaving a lot of image quality on the table for a slight edge in image processing. Ultimately, as amazing as the Sony Bravia 8 is, it's a tough sell against its competitors. Well, that's all for our review of the Sony Bravia 8. If you want a more detailed write-up on the TV, check out our written review. The link is in the description below. Until next time, I'm Abby from Rtings.com, where we help you find the best product for your needs. However, a large portion of shadows, okay. And it only has 2 HDMI 2.1 ports with up to 4K at 100. Okay.